Always trust.
We ask the questions.
What is needed in the world?
Misha Glenny britanski je nagrađivani novinar i pisac. Bio je Guardianov i BBC-ev centralnoevropski dopisnik u vreme pada komunizma i ratova u bivšoj Jugoslaviji. Autor je nekoliko knjiga o raspadu Jugoslavije u kojima opisuje događaje kojima je svedočio. Publikacije su naišle na značajno međunarodno priznanje, nakon čega se posvetio temama međunarodnog kriminala, geopolitike i sajber bezbednosti. Knjiga Mac Mafija adaptirana je u televizijsku dramu. Glenny trenutno radi kao rektor Instituta za humanističke nauke u Beču. Mr. Glenny, thank you for your time for Al Jazeera. We are doing this interview in Sofia, the capital of Bulgaria, while debates on Europe are taking place. Could a person as you, who witnessed and covered the wars in ex-Yugoslavia, imagine that there will be a war in Europe in 21st century?
Well, funnily enough, I did write a piece in the early 1990s, having visited Crimea and Donetsk and Kiev and Lviv, that it could be possible that at some point Russia would find some excuse to try and take back territory in Ukraine, or not take back, I mean to invade territory in Ukraine. And there was always something which would be able to provide a spark, but that at the time in the 1990s, there was still such close collaboration between Moscow and Kyiv that was unlikely in the near future, but possible in the long-term future. So that long-term has now arrived. I have to say, I was one of those many people who didn't think that Vladimir Putin would order the invasion. He did. And it has proved a catastrophe. It's proved a catastrophe, obviously, for Ukraine because of the tens of thousands of people who've lost their lives. It's proved a catastrophe for the country's infrastructure. It has bolstered the national identity of Ukraine in an astonishing manner, and Ukrainians. But it's also a catastrophe for Russia, for Russia's short-term and medium-term future. Russia is depleting itself militarily. It's depleting itself psychologically, socially, culturally, politically, and economically. And it will take Russia a long time to overcome the consequences of this really senseless conflict.
What are your predictions about this war? And in your opinion, how the world will change after this war? And where do you see Vladimir Putin in that war?
Well, we're anticipating two offensives now in the spring, one from the Russians, which has begun in a rather stuttering fashion, and then a counter-offensive from Ukraine, which some parts of the Ukrainian military and security services are confident about, but some parts are less confident about. We cannot really identify how the outcome of the war, the ultimate outcome of the war, without knowing how these two offensives proceed and progress and succeed or fail. Until that happens, it's really difficult to see what's happening. Obviously, you've got three possible outcomes: the military defeat of Russia, the military defeat of Ukraine, or a armistice, a ceasefire, followed by negotiations in which Ukraine would certainly have to make some very painful compromises. But as I say, before we can identify which of those three outcomes is most likely, we need to see what's going to happen in the next 6 months. Looks the case at the moment to me is that there is no incentive on either side at the moment to stop fighting. And President Putin, on this first anniversary of the war, appears to be doubling down on the conflict. So we've got a grim few months ahead of us before we can get a better sense of where this is going. With regard to Putin, Putin is fighting for his life. If Russia is perceived inside Russia as having lost this war, as losing this war, then I can't see Putin surviving for very long at all. And it's likely to create a very chaotic situation inside Russia. We've already seen, for the moment, the influence of the oligarchs, the Abramoviches of this world, the Deripaskas of this world, being replaced by the warlords like Kadyrov and Prigozhin. And Russia, if it loses this war, is likely to be a very, very unstable and unpredictable society with considerable potential for domestic violence.
Mr. Glenny, you were covering the Balkans for 20 years. How do you see Balkans today?
Well, I am very disappointed that more of the Balkans has not been absorbed into the European Union. I was very pleased when Romania and Bulgaria joined in 2007 and Croatia soon after. I'm trying to remember which year Croatia joined.
It was like 2013?
Yes, it was 13. And that was very encouraging, and I was hoping to see more. There's a very small population of the Western Balkans outside of the European Union now, not more than about 20 million. It would be very easy for the European Union to absorb those 20 million people, but the European Union has proved itself time and time again to be a very awkward, very poor strategic actor. And it has failed to put the requisite political energy into the process of absorbing the rest of the Western Balkans. This is, however, as a strategic goal, very important for the EU, and so it needs to get its act together. I was extremely disappointed when Bulgaria decided to block the admission of Northern Macedonia and, by extent, Albania in the same package, because of a domestic political game inside Bulgaria. The European Union ought to make it clear that the integration of the Western Balkans is a European strategic goal that should not be the subject of the whims of domestic politics, whether it's Bulgaria, France, the Netherlands, or whoever, all of whom at some point in the past have been guilty of slowing this process down. So I look at it, economically, it's not doing too badly, but it's not doing well either, and it is suffering from a steady demographic erosion with a lot of young people and talented people, economically active people leaving their various homes to go to Western Europe and the United States. And although it's attracting investment, it is still somehow regarded as unimportant. I would say that since the war started against Ukraine, Russia invaded Ukraine, it's actually become more important. And I don't believe it to be feasible for the EU to integrate Moldova and Ukraine.
So in your perception, what do you think? Will this region of Western Balkans will join European
Yes,
Union?
I
because
think
lately it can be heard that EU is not ready to accept Balkan. Is this real perception?
well, it hasn't accepted. It was promised. They were all promised membership in 2003, which of course is 20 years ago now. And no, I'm just I'm not really surprised. I've been around so long now that seeing the dilatory approach of the EU, seeing the political games inside the Western Balkans or on the periphery of Western Balkans, it doesn't surprise me, but I always nurse the hope that people are going to wake up and say, this is actually a very easy thing to do, let's go ahead and do it. And to see the European Union act with the same geostrategic vision that would complement its economic importance on the world stage.
We have here your book, The Balkans, and what have the Balkans learned after the 2 centuries of nationalism, conflicts and war? Have people and politicians changed their mindset?
Well, yes and no. Things always move forward. But, you know, the nationalism in the Balkans emerged out of the decay of 2 major empires, the Ottoman Empire and the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the interest of 2 other empires, the German Empire and the Russian Empire, in asserting strategic control over the Balkans. And so, and of course, as we know, divided between 3 zones identified by different religions. So it has been a very bloody process which has led to really extreme passions at times that we've witnessed, particularly during periods of conflict. And even such a small issue as the current issue of Bulgaria's objections to North Macedonia's absorption into the European Union, you can see just how damaging those old nationalist passions can still be for the interest not just of North Macedonia, but for the interest of Bulgaria as well. So yes, nationalism still remains a problem here, but there is also, coming through in all Western Balkan countries, there is a younger generation that is more dynamic, that is less interested in nationalism, and given the opportunity, it will express itself in a more positive way.
So, can you see a long-term solution in the dispute between Kosovo and Serbia that can guarantee the stability in this region?
Yes, I think there has been sketched out a long-term solution. We're just waiting for it to be implemented. And, you know, I remain optimistic. I mean, there was for a long time, people said that you would never be able to see an agreement between Kosovo and Serbia. But when Catherine Ashton was the High Representative of the European Union, through a very skilled process of negotiation, she managed to get Kosovo and Serbia to an agreement. And eventually, I believe that Serbia may well recognize Kosovo, thus lifting the final barrier for Serbia to become a member of the European Union. And that would be enormously helpful for the entire region if that were to happen. I think it's worth pointing out that the reason why, until Brexit happened, that Northern Ireland was able to achieve a sustainable and well-organized peace was, at the heart of that was the fact that both the United Kingdom and the Republic of Ireland were members of the European Union. So they had a sovereignty above their national parliaments, and this enabled the Good Friday Agreement. Ultimately, and this is extremely important for Bosnia and for Northern Macedonia and for Kosovo.
North Macedonia.
North Macedonia, sorry.
In North Macedonia, now North
So
Macedonia.
all of these
Okay,
things will help when everyone is in the European Union. Then the issue of disputed sovereignty and territory may not go away completely, but it will be downgraded considerably. And that is the great peace dividend of the European Union. And it goes to show you that Brexit is actually threatening a peace dividend which the European Union helped create in Northern Ireland.
In North Macedonia, for example, it's noticeable that people are feeling cheated and disappointed because the Prespa agreement didn't speed up the European integration. So what message or signal is this situation on the issues that are now on agenda to be solved?
Well, it's really difficult, and I feel very bad for North Macedonia. I don't think that the country has deserved the treatment it's been handed by the European Union, not just by Bulgaria, but by France in 2019, which blocked membership purely because President Macron thought that this might harm his local election prospects. Of course, nobody voting for their town council in Lyon or Lille or wherever it is, none of them paid the blind bit of notice to what was going on in North Macedonia. And yet Macron blocked membership, and that was criminally negligent on the part of the French. And of course, it also gave the idea to a few Bulgarian nationalists that they could do the same thing. So I agree. I think that having signed the Prespa Agreement, having changed the country's name, it should have been fast-tracked straight away for the EU. It hasn't been. And this issue in North Macedonia of disappointed expectations and how people no longer have any faith, the European Union may not pay any attention to that, but it is a serious problem for all of us. The same goes for the other countries which are in the waiting room for EU membership. But as you point out with North Macedonia, it is particularly acute because North Macedonia worked really, really hard to help the West solve other problems that it faced vis-à-vis NATO, the relationship with Greece, and so on and so forth.
How do you comment on political situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina? And what do you see as main reason for political instability in Bosnia now?
But I think the main reason for political instability is that it's a dysfunctional political system that then is exploited by various actors. Milorad Dodik, of course, has been exploiting it very handily for a long time. The Croats have quite a lot to answer for as well, and the country just doesn't appear to me to be working as a functioning country. I don't agree with the idea that Dodik gets his instructions from Belgrade. I think that Vučić actually rather dislikes Dodik, and Vučić puts the brakes on Dodik when he is talking about trying to dismantle Bosnia-Herzegovina as a country, and Dodik is under a fair deal of pressure inside Republika Srpska from his own opposition. So I don't see Bosnia-Herzegovina falling apart, but it is very difficult to see how it can make progress with its present constitution, which of course was written in Dayton, and much will depend on how things develop, particularly in Serbia, domestically inside Serbia, and which way Vučić finally jumps. He's trying to ride two horses at the moment, as everybody knows. We'll wait and see what his ultimate decision is.
How dangerous are the separatist aspiration of Milorad Dodik, and how much do they contribute to the instability of Bosnia and Herzegovina and entire region?
Well, I think it's a constant headache and constant sort of leads to a constant sense of destabilization. But I don't think if Dodik announced his secession from Bosnia-Herzegovina, I don't think it would be supported by Belgrade. And in that sense, you know, Dodik can appeal to Putin and do all his pro-Russian breastbeating, but I don't think that that is sufficient for him to hold out from the influence that Belgrade can exert over Republika Srpska if it feels so inclined.
Mr. Glenny, how do you see on initiatives as Open Balkan, where Mr. Vučić and Mr. Rama are cooperating and trying to open the Balkans?
Well, I'll wait and see what happens as the outcome of the Open Balkans project. What I don't think it should be regarded as is a substitute for the European Union membership. If it helps advance the EU membership strategy, then all well and good. If it doesn't, then it's just another of those Balkan initiatives which, you know, end up in the sand.
You're following Balkan political scene for decades. What do you think, can profiles of politicians as Mr. Vučić and Mr. Kurti are, can solve the Kosovo dispute?
Well, they're under specific forms of pressure to do so. The European Union, Germany in particular, but also more recently other countries, are urging Vučić to come to a deal. The Americans are applying very significant pressure on Albin Kurti to come to a deal. It's very difficult for somebody like Kurti to resist American pressure, but we're speaking 2 days before an announcement about a possible deal or the next possible deal between Kosovo and Serbia, and so I'm talking without prior knowledge to what that deal may be, and so we'll have to wait and see. But there is real pressure on both sides to withdraw from their maximalist positions and come to a compromise agreement. I can only hope that that works.
You've been also covering for a long time issues, topics connected with organized crime and corruption. So what is crucial in fight against corruption, for example, here in Balkans?
Well, corruption and organized crime are phenomena which put down deep and very tough roots very quickly. And this is because of the geography of the Balkans, because it was always on the borders of empires, imperial structures, and because of its terrain, the mountains and so on, this was always a place where smuggling played a very important role in the economy. And after the collapse of communism, the temporary collapse of state authority, the emergence of organized crime groups as being an integral part to the emergence of a free market economy in these areas, it was always going to be very difficult to root this out. There is not a single country in the Balkans which is not still battling and struggling with the issue of corruption, organized crime, mafia structures, and so on. But slowly, over a long period of time, progress is being made and further progress will be made. It's not something that you can ever eradicate.
How much is important the political will of the governing elites in this context?
Incredibly important. Unfortunately, you see when some people decide to address the issue of organized crime and corruption, they often end up getting shot. So that was the case with Zoran Đinđić in Serbia, and it is a very risky business taking on extremely powerful criminal organizations who have built up an integral role in the smuggling of illegal narcotics in particular, but also traditionally cigarette smuggling, the trafficking of women for sexual purposes, and so on. This is a really monumental task, and there's still a long way to go.
Mr. Glenny, you were writing about Balkans, about organized crime, about the mech mafia. What next can we expect from you?
Oh, that's a tricky question. So I've started working as the rector for the Institute of Human Sciences in Vienna, and that's an advanced research institute, but we deal with Central Europe and we deal quite a lot with the Western Balkans. So I'll be returning to the Western Balkans to do some more work on this area, but I'll also be looking into new areas that deal with technology and the green transition and things like that. And I hope to start writing a book in a year or two. We'll see.
Mr. Glenny, thank you for your time for Al Jazeera.
Hvala i vama.
Hvala vam.